So when we go through trauma, often we keep it to ourselves. When we go through difficult times in the past, when we were younger, before we'd gotten onto the spiritual path, and maybe you still do this now, when you go through trauma, you keep it to yourself. And I remember I went through some really difficult things in my 20s. And I didn't tell my parents about it. I didn't tell the people who loved me the most about it. I kept it to myself. I kept it locked into my throat. And that keeps it down. And keeping it down keeps you in a spin of anxious thinking. So we're going to cover this a little bit more in later weeks, but I'll just tell you a little practice you can do. You imagine either now, who do you want to speak to? And you don't have to speak to them. You just imagine do you want to speak to? Or you think back to a past time when you went through a trauma, when you went through difficulty, whatever it was, even just difficulty at school, or being bullied, or a difficult social situation, or whatever caused you these wounds. You think about that time, that difficult time you went through. If you could really have spoken to your parents or someone who loved you, your best friend, your sister, your brother, someone who loved you, who would you have spoken to? For me, one of my biggest traumas happened. I was on holiday with a group of mates and my brother. And this trauma happened, and for 3 weeks I couldn't sleep. I was devastated. I was in an absolute state. And no one understood. I couldn't tell my parents about it. I couldn't tell anyone about it. I was completely alone. My mates were just on holiday getting pissed. And I think back to that time, and I think of my best mate, Kyle, and my brother. And there have been many times I've had them sitting in front of me in my imagination, and I've told them, I've said, I need you, Kyle, I need you, Jim. I'm going through so much, I really need you. And just saying that, I just start crying, and I imagine them holding me. And I say to them, help me, please, I don't know what's going on, please help me. I say it to them in my imagination, and I feel their love coming into me, which is actually the shared love, which is actually the same love that you are coming into me. If you, in those difficult times, could have spoken to someone, who would it have been, and what would you have said? What would you have said? And you play it out, you imagine it. You role play it with them sitting there in front of you. How would they have held you if they were in their hearts, if they were truly understanding, truly able to love you? What would the response have been? And you speak it to them. And in speaking it to them, you unlock that throat, and the trauma which has been held down in the body can unlock, and the tears may flow. You may even start screaming. You may start releasing. And this is one method through which we can start to unlock and heal the past from us, because it is the releasing of the past from us in whatever ways, which is simply the energy stuck in the body which couldn't express at the time. It's the releasing of this energy which brings the thinking down, and which helps you to be at peace and free, because it's this energy which is creating the thinking in the mind. This energy, this pressure of energy, stuck pain, you could call it, is creating the thinking in the mind. And that thinking in the mind is what is keeping you caught in this anxious suffering. So one thing we must work on is coming into the body and meeting these wounds, and meeting this trauma, and meeting the past within us with love, with compassion, with wisdom.